structure and order of execution. Okay, before I go here, right, I just want to tell you what a SQL statement would look like. It says select something from, so this is how a typical SQL statement will look like, okay? This is a typical, this is not all SQL statements. This is just a typical SQL statement. For example, there is a database called database Akil, okay? And in that database Akil, there's a table called payment. Okay, this is a table called payment. In that payment table, there is customer ID, there is amount as different columns. Okay, let me do this. Let me just, so there is a database called Akil. There is a table called, what is the table? Payment. Okay, now this table payment has customer ID. It has amount, and it has some other columns. Okay, I'm just naming it as ABC for now. This is between 1 and 10. Amount is between okay, there are some other columns which I'm not going to put any values. Let's say this is okay. Okay, so there is a database called Akil, and in that database there's a table called payment. Okay, now the SQL query, I'll write it here. Select customer ID, sum of amount as total amount, sorry. From payment, where customer ID is less than 10. Oh, okay. So let me do this. Okay, where customer ID is less than 10, and group by customer ID, having sum of amount greater than 5, order by customer ID. Okay, 1 second. I'll come to that, Rishabh. That's a good question. I'll come to it. Okay, so just imagine this scenario before, this is very important, because if I am going to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask you, can you tell me the SQL order of execution? You should be able to say it. Okay, as I said earlier, SQL is a little bit different than normal programming languages, which means how the code runs is not line by line. For example, you see this code here, which says, select from where. It won't run this line first. Okay, it is not in that order, but you will write it in this order. Okay, so I want you to concentrate really well. Okay, now imagine why this order of execution. Let's say, for example, this database Akil had some other table called customer, called transactions, and something called, okay, let's keep it to 2, right? So this database Akil had 3 tables: payment table, customer table, and transaction table. Now here you will write a query. Okay, select customer ID, the sum of amount as total amount from payment. Logically, what is the first thing that SQL will do? Okay, no, the first thing that it will do is it will go and execute this from payment, because just imagine how SQL was built, why SQL was built. I told you this earlier also, right? SQL was built to make fetching and retrieval of information data more efficient, which means from a big data like which stores everything in one table, the first thing that they did was normalize. The same principle applies here as well, which means if, let's say, database has 3 tables and each table has 1000 records, that means it is 3000 records total, right? Okay, the first thing I want to do is I don't want to operate on 3000 records, correct? Because it is just big. I want to reduce it further. So first what I'll do is I'll identify the table which you're asking for. So table identification. Table identification is payment table. Okay. Payment table. Now each table has 1000 records. So how many records I have to work with now? 1000 records, right? Okay. So from 3000, I have come to 1000 records. Next, what do you think will happen next? See, I'm always trying to optimize. That's the whole goal of SQL. So logically, what do you think should happen? How can I reduce this 1000 further? Yes, customer ID. Great, Kunal. Now, there is a condition here, right? Which says where customer ID is less than 10. In our case, if let's say these were your 1000 records, I will only pick up, let me order this. I will only pick up these. Correct? Yes, search for less than 10 and pick it up. Now, let's say this further reduces to, this is the where clause or filter clause. This 1000 further reduces to, let's say, 500. Okay. So this will get executed next. It will group it. Okay. It will group by customer ID. Now here, actually, since it's a group by function, the select and group by will work together, guys. Okay. So you can say this and 4, but in reality, it will actually work together. Okay. After group by, what happens? It will select. Select is just selecting this information, which is customer ID and amount. All of you remember summary functions in Excel? It is the same thing here. Now, whenever you have a summary function in your select statement, for example, sum of amount is a summary function, you need to have, see, you're summing up amounts for every customer ID. Just try to do it in Excel. What does it mean? That means for every customer ID, I want to sum it up, correct? That's why you have it in the group by clause. So whenever there is a summary function in your select statement, your group by should have the columns where you're not summing the information from. Okay. We will talk about more about it when we do the queries, but something for you to know. After that, what happens is having gets executed. Now, see, your table in the backend only has customer ID, amount, ABC. It does not have sum of amount per customer ID. That is something that you created on the go using the select statement. Now, if you said, hey, having sum of amount greater than 5, SQL will go to this table and check if there is something called sum of amount, which is not there, right? Because you have not even created it. And that's the reason having gets executed after select. Very important interview question. Okay. And then finally, if you want to display the result, you can order it by. Okay. Now this is a typical order of execution in a SQL statement. I'll repeat it. Why having gets executed later is because having works on something that is not, present in the table, right? Because if you look at the table in the back end, there is just customer ID, amount, A, B, C. This having condition is on the sum of amount, which is not present in the table, right? So SQL does not know what is sum of amount. Only if you had created it using select, then it will know, oh, okay, you're talking about this sum of amount created in the select statement, right? And that's why having gets executed after select. Cool. And that is what you see here as well, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now again, this is a very typical statement. It is not how all SQL statements will be. Some SQL statements might just have select and from. Some might have, select from and where. Some might